closer we've gotten to do this, the more I've thought about, well, we have 50 years minimum of coming up with the ideas behind second order science. And behind that, as Jason has pointed out, about 2,500 years dealing with the idea of what is reality and what can we know and how do we know it and so on. So I'm not sure how much I can fit into 10 minutes, but I will start a timer here. So hopefully that will get us going.
You need to share your screen.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So the key idea here is that what we're trying to do in this thing called second order cybernetics or second order science is to make science more robust. And I'll get into a little bit of what that's all about. But I think as I thought about this, I've been thinking about this for about 50 years, what I realized is we've been trying to wean scientists away from realist assumptions that prevent them from seeing the circular nature of science. But we haven't been very successful. But as I thought about it, I realized science is already constructivist in its operations. And so maybe by looking at how science is constructivist in its operation, maybe that might be a way to create an opening here. So this is all based on science that has led to showing that science cannot be based on reality. And in fact, one of Jason's slides actually presented Maturana with a little point that said, not based on reality. So the idea is perception and action are circular, and that living beings perceive what affords action rather than perceiving what is in the world specifically. And some of the research that began the current set of research about cognition began, and certainly it didn't began way before that, but with the Maturana and al. Paper called What the Frog's Eye Tells the Frog's Brain in 1959. And there's been a lot of continuing research that shows that all organisms, even plants, perceive what affords actions that allow them to survive and reproduce. So the point being that cognition does not represent an independent world for all of the organisms that we've looked at, except of course for human beings. Organisms perceive what affords actions, except for humans. Well, how can that be? Yet that's exactly the assumption that science makes, that science, unlike all other results of other organisms, perceives a world independent of ourselves. So how can that be? So if evidence from cognition is not convincing, which we haven't seen much evidence over the last 5 years, 50 years, that people have been convinced by Maturana and all of the other researchers, why not take a look at science itself? So science embraces realist assumptions, in particular the idea that scientific findings are discovered. And discovery implies the idea that things exist independently from the discoverer. And I'm not prepared to say that things don't exist independent from the discovery, but only that what we know is not independent from us as observers. So I think that the operational definition of science actually contradicts the realist notion. Namely, a finding is accepted as valid or true when it meets all criteria defined by a particular science as judged by peer review, and that no accepted validity in science is independent of meeting criteria for a particular science as judged by peer review. And also in science, whatever is valid in science is considered to be temporary, subject to refutation, subject to falsifiability, subject to incorporation into a larger framework, or reduced to a less general framework. So these basically describe circularity, as Maturana has talked about, and certainly this has to be the case. And this is something that Maturana talked about, and even 100 years ago, Weinger and the people on which Weinger based his ideas have talked about this. So restating, operational validity is based on meeting criteria as accepted by judges, and this says nothing about what is independent of the community and criteria. And I noticed that Lou has a very similar idea, and in fact develops what I have here. So while scientists claim knowledge of a real world, science is operationally constructivist. So second order science, which we can call simply science, is recognizing and talking about and taking 1 and 2 above into account when carrying out projects. So this would make science more robust because we then have an opportunity to design and implement processes and systems by considering how those systems and processes that are designed, how the very design affects what the result might be. So not seeing the contradiction between the realist assumptions and the constructivist operation of how science actually works, which of course Maturana pointed out, that we don't actually need the concept of reality to do science. So I'm simply restating what Maturana has said in a different way. So this makes science less robust than it could be regarding how assumptions and processes and interpretations affect the findings, a favorite topic that Michael Lissek has also talked about. So why are these realist claims held on to so firmly? Well, one, it's really distasteful to imagine that we're not finding out everything as it really is, and that what we find out is totally independent of observers. And a favorite theme of Heinz von Foerster was, well, how can that be? Well, one of the things we might consider that there's a strong emotional attachment to the idea that we are finding things which are totally independent, but also the fact that it's distasteful to imagine that the circularity of cognition describes the politicians who continuously change their reality through their language, and also various other kinds of systems, such as religions or other sets of beliefs that are not subject to the kind of systematic investigation that science does. So even though science is circular, nevertheless, it has systematic and rigorous criteria. It has specialized training and apprenticeship to ensure reproducibility of procedures, and also, if possible, reproducibility of findings, although this has created a crisis in science, both in social science and in particularly the medical research. So the question I would ask is, and I still have 2 minutes and 40 seconds to go, how can we make visible the contradiction between realist assumptions and constructivist practice? Because we would like to move toward this area of investigating the assumptions and the designs and the procedures and how those can affect the findings. And to do that can make science more robust. And in fact, the crisis both in, I would say, medical research and social science research is exactly the need to do this kind of thing. And much of this research is already, some of this research has already been done in terms of finding out, for example, who funds you is correlated with kinds of results you get. It doesn't prove that it causes the results you get, but certainly the correlation suggests that there can be a problem in medical research between who funds the research and what the findings are. So that is basically what I would like to say. And this is just, what should I say? This is something that is very, very difficult to get across to a general audience because it took me years of thinking about this and years of reading von Foerster and von Glossersfeld and Maturana. And in fact, Maturana said that when he first started contemplating what his ideas meant, that he started to wonder if he was going crazy. And his colleague said, you don't want to mess with this. You don't want to get into this because this is going to cause you problems. And of course it has, and that's what is necessary in order to move toward a new approach to science. Thank you very much.